Well, hey guys, I'm Nick and welcome back to the channel. Well, today we're talking about the Star Trek feature film. We did a video last week about the possibility that a fourth Star Trek Kelvin movie might still be alive, and did a sort of a comparison as to whether we actually need that or not, because now we've got Strange New Worlds. Haven't seen that video, click up here and you can check that out. But a little bit more information came out from Lindsay Anderson-Beer, who was the screenwriter, talking about the prospect that had previously been floated about a Quentin Tarantino written and directed Star Trek film, and that was in the works for a little while, and what that might have been. Obviously, the notion of Quentin Tarantino directing a Star Trek film is a pretty out there concept. There would have been some very interesting storylines, I'm sure, and a lot of interesting visuals. I'm sure we would have had a female captain sitting in a captain's chair wearing like a mini skirt and bare feet. So it kind of begs the question as to whether a Tarantino Star Trek film would have been, in fact, a good thing for the franchise? Or would it have been just totally out there? Or would it have actually been quite a good film? Because Tarantino is a very talented director. He's one of my favourite directors. Love his films. But Tarantino and Star Trek is an interesting mix. And I'm going to talk about a couple of things that have come out from Lindsay Anderson-Beer about what the Tarantino Star Trek film might have been like had it in fact been made. So apart from the screenplay that Lindsay Beer had written for Paramount for the potential Star Trek 4 feature film, she also revealed she worked in the writer's room back when Tarantino was floating ideas to direct a Star Trek movie. So it goes without saying that if Tarantino had directed a Star Trek film, it would have definitely been an R-rated film. This would not have been a film for under 15-year-olds. This certainly would have been very adult in its concepts. And when Lindsay Beer talked about being in the writer's room with Quentin Tarantino, working on the film, she said, we got in there and he started with, so what are you guys' ideas for the movie? And Lindsay said she went first. So Quentin listened to us all patiently, nodded his head, and then he took out his notebook and started talking for 20 minutes with lines of dialogue and passionate ideas he'd already written. It wasn't really a story yet. There were just random thoughts he had on a movie, but it was so passionate and wonderful, and she laughed and thought to herself, well, why didn't we just start with that? Those who actually saw the script that Tarantino had delivered for the project basically said it was a cool script, describing it as kind of like a pulp fiction in space, and that it definitely would have involved gangsters in some capacity. Whether that kind of means it would have kind of been in the Star Trek universe, but heavily involved in a kind of a seedy, gangster kind of ridden planet, a bit like how we saw in Picard season 3, where we had the Metalis Prime crime syndicates going on. We had Sneed, the Ferengi, and we had the Vulcan character as well, played by a couple of Terry Metalis's friends from 12 Monkeys days. And also, we got to see a bit of that as well on Free Cloud as well in season 1. We had a bit of gangster stuff going on there. So whether it would have definitely leaned into more of that sort of crime syndicates and things like that often pop up in the Star Trek universe or whatever, is a distinct possibility. We might have ended up seeing some of our Starfleet officers kind of, going undercover in this sort of, a bit like what Raffi did in season 3 of Picard, infiltrating crime gangs, that sort of stuff. But no doubt we would have seen, Samuel L. Jackson as some sort of Klingon crime lord, perhaps. Maybe Tim Roth as a Ferengi, Michael Madsen as some crusty old Starfleet captain, or maybe even Christoph Waltz as a Betazoid doctor or something. And Uma Thurman, who had the Vulcan hairstyle down to a pretty accurate art in Pulp Fiction, so she would have been very good in that role, goes without saying. I can see Kurt Russell being a crusty old chief engineer of the starship, and Amanda Plummer has already graced Star Trek screens with her role as Vadic in season 3 of Picard, but maybe we'd see her standing on a captain's chair, phaser in hand, screaming at the bridge crew. Harvey Keitel as the admiral who gives the orders to the crew. I reckon Brad Pitt would make a pretty convincing chief of security. But whichever way you look at it, it's no doubt that Quentin Tarantino would have made a pretty unique Star Trek film with an array of very quirky and interesting characters that would have had us enjoying a pretty rollicking and out there ride within the Star Trek universe. I guess it would have kind of been that leading into that Quentin Tarantino Pulp Fiction sort of style, gangsterish sort of dialogue, but very obviously snappy dialogue, as he has in all of his films, and definitely leading into that kind of element of the Star Trek universe, which we've sort of seen glimpses of, but never in huge detail. The film was to include James T. Kirk as well as other familiar characters as well, but obviously this fizzled out back in kind of, around 2017, 2018, and sort of never ended up kind of seeing the light of day again. Lindsay Beer got some pretty good praise from Tarantino, being really good in the writer's room, came up with some really good concepts and everything, which obviously ultimately led to her writing a draft for the another Star Trek 4 project. But it seems like all of these writers that kind of have penned these drafts for the various different Star Trek films have since gone on to other things. So it's kind of like a lot of false starts going on here. But nonetheless, it would have been interesting to see a Tarantino Star Trek movie. I think we definitely would have seen a very interesting side of the Federation or the Alpha Quadrant, definitely leading into the gangster element and everything. And look, I would have just been interested to see how he managed to crowbar some bare feet into a Star Trek film. I'm sure he would have done it somehow or another. Some female captain sitting in the captain's chair, she's just come back from, out of a holodeck program or something, that she's been on the beach perhaps, and has to get to the bridge quickly and doesn't have time to put her shoes on or something to that effect. No doubt would have happened at least once in the film without question. But what do you guys think? Do you think a Quentin Tarantino Star Trek film would have been an interesting outing? Do you think it was a bit of a misplaced matching of director and project? Or do you think, hey, no, I love Tarantino movies. I know he's a massive Star Trek fan. He's always been pretty vocal. Even some of his past films have had Star Trek references in them and everything. So he's always never been shy to profess his love for the Star Trek franchise in interviews and in little references and homages that have been scattered throughout a couple of his previous films. But yeah, what do you think? Would this have been a good match? Is this something we would have wanted to see as Star Trek fans? Or do you think it would have been just completely just way too out there and way too different to what we'd kind of been accustomed to in the past? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section, and we can get chatting about that. Guys, if you haven't subscribed to Sci-Finatics yet, please don't be shy to do so. Click on that big subscribe button to stay current and up to date with all the latest Star Trek news on YouTube. And be sure to check out my merch in the merch drawer. Plenty of cool Star Trek themed t-shirts, hoodies, mugs, caps, stickers, you name it, it's all there. Always very reasonable bargain prices and everything, and it helps support the channel at the same time. Guys, I'll be back very soon with my next video. I'll see you then.